Right, so the 2021 Buffalo Bills regular season schedule has finally come out, and I'm looking forward to listening back to this little ramble prediction video. Um, Probably at the beginning of the season, during the season at some point, and then hopefully at the end of the season, just to kind of see where my prediction and where my thoughts, ended up after the fact, and where my headspace was and how correct I was or incorrect I was, because I did that before the 2019 season, and it was very interesting to go back and listen to it. But for some reason, I guess I just didn't do it in 2020, which really sucks because 2020 was the biggest year by far of my time being a Buffalo Bills fan, and it was just an incredible season. The Bills went 13-3. At one point, they won 8 games in a row, or 10 games in a row, I believe. Once you factor in the playoffs, they won 2 playoff games. Josh Allen had an MVP caliber season, and ultimately, yeah, they were 1 game short of the Super Bowl. But they kind of got murdered in the AFC Championship, if we're being completely honest. But still, nonetheless, the fact that the Bills made the AFC Championship, something I've never ever seen before in my life previously, and not necessarily something I would have expected, this time last year. But nonetheless, I thought the schedule last year was pretty hard. I thought we had two of the toughest divisions to play, the AFC West, the NFC West. This year, looks like we get the AFC South as well as the NFC South. So we got the Souths, which, personally, I think the NFC South, now that Drew Brees has departed, I think that definitely lessens the threat, in my opinion. Say what you will about how good he was last year, but I don't think the Saints are nearly as threatening. The Panthers are kind of a mess, and obviously the Bucks with Tom Brady are a huge threat. And the Falcons, you really never know what you're gonna get, but I don't think. Come on, you can't really look at them and say that they're a scary team. But obviously, at the same token, you don't really know what you're gonna get because yeah, they played like shit for the better part of last year, but they also had some games where they really stuck it to some teams. But AFC South, on the other hand, you got a couple dumpster fires in there. Jacksonville is terrible. I know they got Trevor Lawrence and Urban Meyer, but let's be real here. Then you got the Houston Texans, enough said. And then you also have two pretty good teams, Titans and the Colts, I think are two of the most well-balanced teams in the NFL. And I look at both of those squads, and it's hard to really pinpoint a weakness. And I really respect those organizations because it's hard to find a team that's that well-balanced. Because even you look at a squad like the Chiefs, their defense is pretty suspect, and they've just got an exceptional quarterback. Otherwise, save for Patrick Mahomes, how good are the Chiefs? But if you take away a good quarterback from the Colts or the Titans, I still think they're going to be just as good or similarly good to what they actually are. But anyway, enough talking about the Bills' opponents. Let's talk about the Bills. So the big things the Bills did in the offseason, they really didn't lose anybody too significant. I would say that I can remember the biggest departure was probably John Brown from the receiving room. But they cut John Brown, and then they added in Emmanuel Sanders. Now, Emmanuel Sanders is I would say he's in his mid-30s at this point. I think he's 34. That's pretty old for NFL standards. And John Brown, I believe, turned 30. So there's definitely a huge age gap there, or a pretty big sized age gap for NFL standards, right? The difference between a 30-year-old player, to me, that's towards the end of their prime, versus a 34-year-old player is certainly past their prime. But if we really think about it, Emmanuel Sanders, even last year, despite his older age, he's been producing at solid number 2 level standards. And there's no way he's going to usurp Stephon Diggs as the Bills' number 1 threat. And as a guy who I think he got like 700 or 800 yards last year and a handful of touchdowns in New Orleans with Drew Brees playing at not his best, I feel like it's not too far-fetched to believe that he will get similar production or can get similar production in Buffalo. And I mean, John Brown was injured a lot last year, but even still, they did just fine without him. And then when he played, he wasn't the number one receiver, so he wasn't, carrying a lot of the snaps and targets. But nonetheless, he wasn't lighting the world on fire anyway. So personally, I don't think it's too big of a trade-off. I feel like it's kind of even. If anything, I feel like Manuel Sanders is a little bit more experienced. He's played in Super Bowls before. He's played with a bunch of different quarterbacks. He's a seasoned vet. Not to say that John Brown isn't, but I don't really think there's much of a drop-off. So it's hard to say that the Bills team really got that much worse. Because, I mean, in the draft, they picked at 30, so it's kind of hard to really say that, okay, the person that they're going to draft, barring like a running back maybe, is going to make a big impact in year one, especially since they drafted, their 2 first picks, their three first picks essentially were players that probably are not going to make much of an impact at all in year one, being Gregory Rousseau, Carlos Basham, and then Spencer Brown, the tackle from Northern Iowa. I think those are 3 fantastic picks. I think if you're picking at the end of round 1, you can't expect to draft a receiver who's going to be your automatic number 1, not a running back, but like a pass rusher who's going to be a dominant pass rusher out the jump. Like, you're not going to get these top 10 caliber picks that are going to come in and start on a team that just, made a deep playoff run. It's not going to happen. The Bills' defensive line last year, in my opinion, at times was their biggest weakness on a team that really didn't have a lot of weaknesses. If we're being honest, I think they were pretty solid all around the board. But in the games that they lost, they absolutely got run off the field up front and got their ass kicked. Couldn't get after the quarterback, couldn't stop the run. If you look at the 4 games they lost last year, it was a pretty common theme, save for probably the Cardinals game. And I think you got guys like Rousseau, who has a huge upside. He's more of a pass rush guy, but he's got massive upside. And, I'll be interested to see how they work him in. And then you also got Basham, the end of round 2, another guy for the defensive line, which is kind of loaded right now if we really think about it. And then Spencer Brown is more depth for the offensive line. I think Josh Allen's skill position players, receivers, I think he's doing just fine. Running backs, they did bring in Matt Breida in free agency, which I think is a really big pickup because they needed somebody in the backfield that could really, turn the burners on, because Zach Moss and Devin Singletary just were not doing it. And then, tight end room is I guess the biggest issue for the Bills offense and Josh Allen. But otherwise, I mean, I think they're pretty well stacked. I think the offensive line is nice. They signed Darrell Williams. They brought back John Feliciano as well. Like, they didn't lose any big starters. I guess Ty Nsekhe, but I mean, I think he was going back and forth between the starting job with guys like Cody Ford and Darrell Williams at the guard and tackle position. So really, I don't think there was much that was lost by the Bills in the free agency. And there wasn't too much that was gained in free agency either. They didn't have a lot of money, but they did use their money well. They re-signed guys like Matt Milano and Darrell Williams. And personally, I think that that's a smart way to go and, operate, because you don't need to make your team or break your team in free agency, right? You see that happen a lot, and obviously at the time it'll make you happy. You look at the Patriots. They went out and they spent a fuck ton of money, and they brought in a bunch of, in my opinion, B-tier players that I don't think are going to make too much of an impact, because, like, oh yeah, Hunter Henry is probably their best player that they signed, and he's good, and he's a really good, like, top 5 tight end, but it's a tight end, But, like, how much of an impact is Kendrick Bourne really going to make? Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of going all out on all those free agents, but I'm not a Patriots fan. I'm a Bills fan. And so, yeah, they didn't really lose anybody in free agency. They didn't really gain anybody either. I mean, and they didn't really draft anybody that I think will make much of an impact, but they retained their roster from last year. And they did pretty good last year when it comes to avoiding the injury bug. They didn't face a ton of adversity in that department. I mean, you had guys like John Brown miss a little bit of time, and Tre'Davious White got banged up. I mean, at that Titans game, there were a lot of injuries. But I mean, your big time players, Josh Allen played, Stephon Diggs played, and Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, all those guys were pretty consistently in the lineup. And so, there wasn't much loss from injuries, which is a good thing looking back, right? And that's unfortunate because you can never really know when shit like that's going to flare up, because you look at the 49ers last year, they lost so many really good players and their team took a massive hit because of it. But it's one of those situations with the NFL. It's something you kind of have to account for. And I can't really speak much on the durability of the guys they drafted. But what I will say is, I'll be able to look back on this during the season and at the end of the season and know, well, hey, Emmanuel Sanders, I'm not too excited about the signing, but I think that he'll do fine. Perhaps he gets injured the whole season, or perhaps Stephon Diggs gets hurt the whole season. Knock on fucking wood. But maybe Gabe Davis steps up, or maybe, God forbid, somebody else that's a really nice player at one of our positions. I'm not going to name drop because I don't want to freaking jinx anything, but the backup comes in and makes a huge impact and really makes a name for himself. It can happen. It's the NFL. As long as, our boy doesn't go down, doesn't get dinged, doesn't take a massive step back, I think the Bills are going to be poised for another big season and their third straight playoff run. But anyway, enough about that. Let's go ahead and talk about 2021. And so the Bills' running game last year was pretty weak. This year, I would like to think that it's probably going to be more of the same, in that it's not going to be a top flight unit. It's not going to be top 10, certainly not. It'll probably be at least top 15. I would say top 15 is in the ballpark, because the Bills do have a pretty mobile quarterback in Josh Allen, so that's going to allow them to rack up, higher statistics when it comes to the rushing department. But, you still have your same Singletary and Moss combo. I would like to think that Moss is going to take a bit of a step forward. Singletary's been kind of plateauing, at least last year. He didn't make much improvement throughout the season, but they did bring Matt Breida in, who has been a little injury prone, but I like him a lot, actually, as kind of a scat back guy that'll come in there and can, run a marathon and just run by everybody, or, give him some open space, and he can fly, right? And so I really like that, and I think, the Bills are going to have a really good offense this year, because if they can pass protect like the way they were able to last year, and can maybe improve slightly when they're run blocking, I mean, man, what's to say that this offense isn't going to be even better than it already was? And I saw Josh Allen make some throws last year where I'm like, bro, this guy is got the it factor, because this is not luck, because he was consistently throwing these darts on the sideline, or through these three defenders, or rolling to his left and then just zipping one in over the middle. Like, he flourished so well. And like I said, I think that there's a good chance that he'll be able to do it again this year. Now, let's talk about the schedule. So obviously there's 17 games this year, as opposed to the traditional 16 games. And the extra 17th game is a cross-conference game against, I don't know if it changes each year, but this year it is against the opposing conference, like cardinal direction aligned division. And so the Bills won the AFC East, so they would play the NFC East champion, and vice versa. If you finish last in your division and you're in the NFC West, you're going to place the last place AFC West team. And so the Bills get to play the Washington football team. They lucked out. They did, because if you're going to ask me, would you rather play the Washington football team, the Green Bay Packers, the Seattle Seahawks, or the freaking New Orleans Saints. I wouldn't mind playing the Saints, but yeah, give me the football team all day because they're a mess. Who the fuck's their quarterback? Ryan Fitzpatrick? Sorry, I don't. I'm not intimidated by him. I know everybody is at some point, but no. However, this 17-game season is not really a big deal. It's not really much different because all it does is just take away a preseason game, right? So I think the preseason starts a week late, and the season still begins like the second week of September, and looks like it actually interesting. So it looks like it ends the second Sunday in January. That's new. Interesting. Perhaps, is there 2 bye weeks? No, there's only 1 bye week. Okay, well, that's kind of interesting. Did not know that. So yeah, week 1, the Bills get to host the Pittsburgh Steelers, who I think they're kind of a hard team to really get a read on because obviously they started last year 11-0, and then they finished 12-4. So I mean, they went 1-4 in their last 5 games after starting 11-0, and they got absolutely destroyed in the playoffs. They ended the season terribly. They ended the season honestly similarly to how I thought they would just perform going into last year, like a mediocre 8-8 team. And I mean, they had an exceptional defense, and they had a declining Big Ben. And I think that's going to be part of the course this year. I think they're going to be a tough out. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers with Big Ben are always going to be a threat to pretty much anybody. But I think the Bills have got a good chance. And, there's no way the Bills are going to go 17-0, but I'm confident that I think the Bills are legitimately favored and or have a good chance to beat everybody on their schedule. Straight up, because I think the Bills are a top 3 team in the NFL. But that's not going to happen. Although I think the Steelers, they're a tougher opponent than what people may think. The Dolphins, this interesting one, they go down to Florida early on in the season. I don't know if it's better to go into Miami earlier or later. I think probably earlier is a little bit better just because, if you're going like the first week of January into Miami, it might be a little bit of an adjustment. Josh Allen loves to play against Miami. He loves to play in the Miami sunshine and that humidity. And I mean, he torches them every time. And I do not fear Tua. I appreciate the way the Dolphins play. Brian Flores does a good job last year with getting what he could out of that team the year before, and winning 10 games. The next is impressive, but I mean, Josh Allen destroys the Dolphins, and I have a hard time believing that the Bills lose this game. Then of course we get our Washington football team date. Nobody in the NFC East is good. I think the Cowboys with Dak Prescott have some continuity at the most important position. Therefore, I think they're the best team in the division. But the football team, they got some nice pieces, especially on defense. But I know it's early on in the season. Fitzpatrick doesn't really have much to prove. But that's still, I don't know. I'm not a huge believer into the Fitzmagic hype because you can't expect it. Like, you don't know. For all we know, Fitzpatrick could be 2-0 going into this game and could have just had his one, hit every couple 3-week of the season wonder game, and he's back to being shitty. I don't know, but I think this is one of those games where, the Bills are probably going to win. I mean, there's a high chance they're going to win. And same with the Texans the next week. They're a fucking mess. I think the Bills have got a really good chance. I would be shocked if they did not go at least 3-1. I would be legitimately shocked, and I would expect them to go 4-0 straight up in these first 4 games. I'm just being honest. And so the next 4 weeks are kind of brutal, and it is pretty much the exact same as last year, in that you have the Chiefs and the Titans back to back. You don't have them each on the road and at home, respectively. You actually have them both on the road. And I mean, last year, these were 2 of the worst games the Bills played, in my opinion. Shocker, those were 2 of the few games they've lost, but still. And I personally still think that the Chiefs are a deadly force. I know they got embarrassed in the Super Bowl, but I think personally that was kind of an anomaly. And it was just they couldn't pass protect Patrick Mahomes. I still think Patrick Mahomes has got this kind of Brady quality to him where it's just he's such a tough out and like he doesn't quit and he's so fucking good and they're always going to be a threat with him. And so I mean I just don't think that the Bills would be favored in this matchup against the Chiefs. I'm going to be honest. It's on the road. It's in prime time, though, so it's going to be a fucking great watch. And I'm so very excited. I think, I think the Bills definitely have a chance, but, I mean, honestly, I'm leaning like 35-65 on the Chiefs on this one. And then we have at the Titans again on Monday night. So the Bills get a Sunday night football game, and then they get a Monday night game. So they get an extra day of rest, but back-to-back primetime games. And the Bills had like 5 primetime games in a row last year at the end of the year, and they just mopped the floor with everybody they played. The Titans, you really never know with these games. It's impossible to predict. If you would have told me the Bills would have beaten the Seahawks and Rams and lost to the Cardinals last year, I would have been like, really? That's kind of weird. And so, I mean, individually picking these games, I'm not going to do it because it's impossible. But I think the Titans, I said it before when talking about the Colts as well, they're an incredibly balanced team. And I'll be really excited to see how the Bills' run defense is looking, especially with the bolstered front that they have now through the draft. I think they have a better chance in this game than they do against the Chiefs. But honestly, to me, it feels 50-50 just based on how demoralized the Bills were whenever they played against the Titans last year. But I don't know. I feel like the Bills have a better chance to win this game. And then they have the bye week. So they have their 2 toughest games going into the bye, which is kind of nice. But coming out of the bye, they get the Dolphins, who I touched on them earlier. I don't fear them, especially with Tua. And they're getting him relatively early on. I mean, by game, 7, the Bills will be finished playing the Dolphins. And they're getting him on Halloween in Buffalo. I don't know what the weather's going to be like because we had like a 65-degree game against the Seahawks this year in the middle of November. So, but I feel like the cold could play an effect at this point in the season. And last time Tua played in Buffalo, that whole team got humiliated, but especially him, he was awful. And so, I mean, I feel like the Bills have a really good chance of beating the Dolphins, sweeping them. Again, Josh loves playing the Dolphins. And then you got the Jaguars after that in Jacksonville. But, I mean, come on. Do you really think Trevor Lawrence is going to get shit popping right out the gate? I don't think so. So, yeah. I feel like 2-2. Man. It's because I'm going to do it 4 games by 4 games. Because I think that's the best way to do it. I think a safe bet is 2-2. I'm gonna say 3-1 is your safe bet, but I would not be surprised if they went 2-2. 3-1 is what I'm gonna say that they're gonna go. Just being straight up. But 4-0 would be kind of crazy. But at the same time, 2-2 would be kind of wild as well. Because like I know the Bills did it last year where they lost 2 in a row to literally the 2 teams that I anticipate would happen if they were to go 2-2 in these 4-game stretch. But man, I'm thinking about it, man. This Bills team could shape up to be one of the best teams that they ever had. And I like to think they'll go 3-1, but 2-2 is not out of the question. 4-0, ooh, that'd be fucking crazy. Oh my goodness. Because if they can go 4-0 in that 4-game stretch, what's to say they're not 4-0 through the first 4-game stretch, which I think is a lot easier. I don't know. That's nuts. But we finally get our first game against the fucking Jets. Was it week 9 or week 10? The Jets are... At this point, we'll know what the Jets are. And a lot of these teams that I think are going to be a lot different going in from last year to this year. By the time we're playing, the Jets and the Saints and the Patriots, they'll probably be relatively distinguished and you'll know what they are. I would be shocked if both the Jags and the Jets are much different than what they were last year, and that they're going to be a top 8 picking team in the NFL draft. But it's possible. Nonetheless, I think the Bills will mop the Jets. I think there's a great chance that they will. They get to come home and play the Colts outside. The Colts are a great team. I think the Bills have got a good chance to beat the Colts. Then they get to go at New Orleans to play Jameis and the Saints. Could be a tough game in New Orleans. It's a Thursday night game, so super excited about that. But I mean, if Jameis or Taysom are your starting quarterbacks, it's indoors. Josh loves indoors. It's in primetime. Josh loves primetime. I don't particularly think the Saints defense is that vaunted and is gonna shut them down, and it's gonna be an under 20 points kind of game. So I don't know. I feel like it'd be hard to pick against the Bills in that game. And then you got another Monday night game, the Bills hosting the Patriots, and Mac Jones, who will likely be the starting quarterback that late into the season. Once again, man, I'm feeling another 3-1 potential 4-0 stretch. I will say, of the 4 games, 3 of those 4 teams I think are going to have a fighting chance at the playoffs. I really do. I think the Patriots are a scrappy team with Belichick, and I feel like they might have some more consistent play. The Saints are a really good team, and Drew Brees wasn't even that good last year, and they still won a lot of games. And I feel like I've sucked off the Colts enough so far. The Jets are the Jets, but you know I think the Bills will probably go 3-1 in this 4-game stretch. 4-0, I think that's a high ask personally. 2-2, I'd be kind of surprised, but I feel like 3-1 is the sweet spot, right? So, what, through 12 games, I think I have the Bills at 9-3. That sounds about right. And so your last 5-game stretch here is where it gets interesting, because the Bills get to go to Tampa on a 4 p.m. game, called by Tony Romo and Jim Nantz. That's going to be awesome. Very excited about that. And you know, Tom Brady has the Bills number, and for that, I'm just convinced that they just can't beat him, because it seems like, despite at times before having good matchups / just seemingly being the better team, the Bills have always seemed to make mistakes and just faltered in the face of Tom Brady. I mean, that 2019 Patriots team was really not that good. Granted, I don't think the 2019 Bills team was all that good, but like they played like shit both of those games against the Patriots, and I think the Bucks, that team is so much better than any of the other like Patriots teams that the Bills should have beaten, that were kind of lacking, that they lost to anyway. So similar to the Chiefs, I'm feeling like a 35-65 type deal, and this is, I mean, spoiler alert, one of 2 matchups that I think the Bills are not favored in, and or the Bills have a better chance of winning than losing. But I mean, anything can happen. It is in Tampa, so the weather should be nice. So maybe Josh will be able to kind of, air the ball out. I don't necessarily think that the Bucks have a great secondary. They have a nice pass rush, obviously, but the Bills have a pretty good pass protecting offensive line. So I don't know. That will be a really interesting watch. Then you got the Panthers at home towards the end of December, a week before Christmas. I would be shocked if the Panthers were able to pull something out, really. I mean, I think I think you can kind of pencil that one in. At Patriots, the day after Christmas, the game after that. I don't really... The Patriots, man. Without Tom Brady, the Bills recently, at least, have had no issues with them at all whatsoever. Can't remember the last time they lost, now that I think about it, without Tom Brady starting. I feel like the last 6 or 7 games that Tom Brady hasn't played in, the Bills have won. And I expect more of the same. I think the Bills can sweep them again. Then we got the Falcons at home on January 2nd in week 17, I guess, since they're 18 weeks now. I like the Bills in that matchup. If it was, in Atlanta at the end of the season, perhaps that could be similar to, I don't know if Atlanta did it last year, but I know the year before They beat the 49ers at the end of the season, despite the 49ers just being a dominant team and the Falcons not being much of a threat. And I think actually, yeah, they should have maybe beat the Chiefs last year at the end of the year. But I'll be interested to see how the Falcons do. I really over the past couple of years have put way too much faith into Matt Ryan and that offensive firepower that they have, that they should be able to equate uh, into more success than they do. But I mean, come on. I think at home the Bills should be able to take care of business. And then they finish in week 18 against the Jets. They're the Jets. The Bills division is very weak. And I think, 6-0 is not out of the realm of possibilities. They went 6-0 last year. And yeah, the Jets aren't going to be as bad as they were this year. But, I mean, will the Patriots be better than they were this year? Will the Patriots win more than, 500, 8-8 or whatever, or 7 or 8 games? I don't know. Will the Dolphins win 10 games plus again, even with the extra game? I don't know, dude. I think the Bills have got a good chance of winning the division comfortably. I do. And I think in the last 5 games, 4-1, or I'm gonna say they go. I'm gonna say they go 3-2. But yeah, I think that's pretty realistic. I think the Bills' schedule is not too difficult. I'm gonna say they go 4-1. Actually, I'm gonna say they go 4-1, and then that comes out to what, 13-4, I believe. I got the Bills going. Yeah, I feel like that's a pretty fair way to look at things based on the fact that they retained all their pieces. They don't have much of a tough schedule, and they do have a dominant quarterback who has only gotten better and better. And at times last year, he really showed me that, hey, I can do this thing. He won 2 playoff games. Because I personally think playoff games are huge indicators of whether or not your quarterback is legit or not. And I mean, he showed me in those playoff games that when they needed him the most, he fucking stepped up. All right. And so, yeah, I think he's going to have another really big season. I do. And just to recap, the first 4, I got them going 3-1. Their next 4, I got them going 3-1 again. Their next, what was that? Their next 4 after that, I got them going 3-1, 3-1, 3-1, 4-1. So I got them going 13-4, and I don't anticipate there being a point in the season to which they will have a skid. I feel like, they will probably be win 3, lose 1, win 4, lose 1. I don't know how streaky of a team they'll be. Last year they won 8 in a row in the regular season towards the end there. Maybe that'll happen. For all I know, the Bills could start 3-3 and then win 9 games in a row. I mean, literally, if you count the playoffs, they did that last year, but they didn't start 3-3. Yeah, so those are my thoughts on the Bills' schedule. I don't know how I feel about, going into predictions on like statistical performances of individual players, but I'm really excited to see how Emmanuel Sanders does. I feel like if you look up the statistics of John Brown last year, that he'll match those. I'm pretty confident in that, which should be what, 700 yards and maybe 5, 6, 7 touchdowns. Really excited to see how Gabriel Davis does in year 2, because I feel like he might have a little bit more of a responsibility and more of a emphasized role in the offense. Stephon Diggs, though, and Josh Allen both, I expect more of the same all-pro caliber play from them, and if we can get that, then yeah, 13-4 is a great possibility, and potentially, 14-3 could not be too far-fetched. One thing I will say, I'm very confident that the Bills will win the AFC East, just because they have the best all-around team, they have the most continuity and consistency of anybody in the AFC East, and they have by far the best quarterback in the AFC East. And when you have all of those things going your way, the odds of you not winning your division are just so fucking low. But yeah, I'd expect more of the same. A dominant passing attack, not a great running attack, but enough to get the job done. I feel like the defense last year it was a solid 6 or 7 out of 10. I expect more or less the same. I mean, it's kind of boring, but they didn't add a ton in the offseason. They didn't lose a ton in the offseason, so I don't know. And I don't really anticipate a lot of their players making huge improvements. A lot of their young players. I mean, is Dawson Knox really going to dominate this year? Is Devin Singletary and Zach Moss just going to blow up this year and one of them is going to take off for 12 or 100 yards? I don't think so. I don't think so. But 13-4, AFC East champions again. Probably the second seed, maybe the third seed if things go crazy. And it's going to be a really exciting and fun time and season to be a Buffalo Bills fan. Fuck yeah, I am excited. And Max, I really want to know, how is the living situation going? Because I will be damned if I am not listening to this back on September the 11th. Yeah, the night before kickoff. I hope the future is going well. Go Bills.